If we're breathing, we have the possibility of being involved in the kingdom and making a difference. Either that or prayer, faith, speaking encouragement, speaking blessing over. Okay, now if we're going to move all that aside and take all that out of the Bible, okay, you're 65 and you're done. But if we're going to take the entire Bible for what it says, then you could be a shut-in or in a nursing home and with the only ability to pray, and literally powerful things can be happening through your life.
Well, welcome back to the podcast, Terry Shock.
It's good to be here. Is this going to be a normal thing?
Well, you are my favorite guest. So, I mean, it might be a normal thing. If you keep putting out good content, we may consider.
Oh, if not, I see. I get it.
Today, we're going to talk about something that we have been teaching. And I was trying to think how long we have been teaching this. I think it's probably about 15 years at least.
60, 70.
Well, maybe not quite that long, but about 15 for sure years. We're going to be talking today about our tree presentation. We have done this all over the world, literally, and we are actually in the process of making a product out of this. So we're not going to be going too in depth because the product will speak. But do you remember how this even came about?
How could I forget? Yes, we have. We have climbed this tree all over the world.
Yes,
There's no doubt.
Yes, we have.
So I get to tell.
You get to tell the story of how it came about.
Okay. So we were invited to do a district marriage retreat, marriage seminar, marriage something. Right. District.
Leadership of a state, yes.
And so it was a Wednesday night. I came home from ministering and busy. And I come through the house after church, and you asked this question: what are you going to teach at this marriage retreat? And I told you. And you looked at me, and you said these words: that is so old and boring. Now, when I tell you that my anger meter, Ferraris can go, 3 seconds, 5, 6 seconds, 0 to whatever. Mine blew through the Ferrari. I was mad. I was tired. We were supposed to leave Friday morning. This is Wednesday night after church. I've got a full day Thursday. And you're just going to look at me and say what I was going to offer was old and boring.
I'm so sorry.
No,
Please
you're not.
accept my apologies.
No.
Yeah, I'm sorry. No. I'm not sorry for what I said, but I'm sorry for the way I said it. So forgive me for that.
Okay, well, I can accept that.
Okay, all right.
And so after I calmed down a little bit, we drug out the whiteboard. Every home needs a big whiteboard somewhere.
What does that say about our marriage? That our massive whiteboard was a staple in our house.
Well, you have to draw things out. And so
we did.
So we brought out the whiteboard, and you know what? God spoke.
He did.
God spoke.
He really
and
did.
Continues.
Yeah.
And continues, because I was thinking before, whenever you said that, when we agreed on the idea of this podcast, I was thinking, I wish I had the first notes, and I'm sure I could find them somewhere, but I haven't been able to find them. I don't even know if it would even look much like this, except for like maybe the key scripture or a couple of them.
I actually found, I don't know if it was the first notes, but I found like the next year or two after that, I found those the other day.
Did you?
And they were like just not even on this. I mean, it's
It's
the
not.
same. It's the same direction. It's the same topic, but it's just
Yeah.
totally. This has grown and grown and grown and grown.
Well, let's do a quick climb version
Okay,
here,
we
just a
will.
quick climb,
We will.
and then everybody can get the product whenever it comes
Yeah.
out, and it'll probably be an encyclopedia.
It probably will, but it's taking us so long to get it out because we can't, and I'm not going to say agree on, because it's not that we're not agreeing. It's just that we cannot land on the best package for it because there is so much to it, and it's a birth to death study. It's not a
Right.
particular age group
Right.
or whatever. So yeah. So anyway, just know that it's coming out. We have taught this. We have taught this all over. In fact, we have a big stand up banner in our office. So when people come in, they'll say, "What is this?" And we'll say, "Oh, this is just what we've taught all over the world." But what it is really the basis of our lives. Um, it is a great pattern for life. We've taught it to leadership because it's a great pattern for a leader's life. We have taught it to just anybody. We've taught it to marriage retreats. We've taught it to people who are not even churched. We have taught it to all denominations. I remember
In
yes,
Africa.
in Madagascar, we were able to teach it to several different denominations at one time. It's something that transcends denomination. It's a kingdom principle,
Right.
and that's what I love about it because it applies to every single person that's born, regardless of their culture, but regardless of their denomination, regardless of whatever. So we just kind of want to give an overview of it. So the scripture that we based it on was Jeremiah 17:7-8, which says, "Blessed is the man that trusteth in the Lord, and whose hope the Lord is. For he shall be as a tree." And that's the phrase that we
Right.
really, really grab onto. He shall be as a tree. He shall be like a tree. He shall be as a tree planted by the waters, and that spreadeth out her roots by the river, and shall not see when heat cometh, but her leaf shall be green, and shall not be careful in the year of drought, neither shall cease from yielding fruit. And that right there, those two verses describe what our entire life should be.
Right.
So we start at the roots. We start with the root system, and we divide it up into 4 sections. And this is where it has morphed
Just
through the
keeps
years.
going.
Yeah. So we start at the root system, and I think you lead that off usually.
Well, when we're talking about our roots, that is God connection. And I trust if anybody is listening to this podcast and did not listen to the podcast we did some time ago on God connection,
Right.
the whole topic was God connection, that they'll go back and grab that. But it speaks of prayer and the word. That's our roots. If a tree has a problem, the problem is going to be traced down to the roots. What are the roots taking in and sending up through the entire tree? And so we have to be extremely careful of what we're taking in. And so through prayer and the word, prayer is our oxygen. The word is our food. And if we're going to be a strong tree, then that's what is going to feed our roots. Now, the interesting thing about the roots also, and is how the roots will grow much larger than the drip line.
Right.
And some, some trees roots can go up to 3 times
Right. As deep.
as
Yes.
as
the drip line.
as the tree is tall. And just the root. What are we taking in? What are we taking in? And I mean, we could go on and on there. We could hit so many things. I mean, what are our eyes taking in? What are our ears taking in? What are we speaking? What are we thinking? And it's that root issue. When we talk about it's a root issue,
Mm-hmm.
maybe a play on word, that's
Mm-hmm.
exactly what it is.
Yeah. Yeah. One example that I think we give a lot in the root session that when we're teaching is, we come from the South and we were very familiar with hurricanes and big storms. I
Right.
mean, even if we didn't have a hurricane, we always had storms all year, really. And that you will after a storm, you will go by and you will see large trees that were just toppled by that storm. And it makes you wonder, how in the world did that huge, massive tree, why did this storm, which many times isn't even a terrible one, just maybe a little wind, and then the tree will blow over. Why did that happen? Why did that happen? And almost always, if they go in and look at it, it had to do with the root system. It was a
Right.
decayed root system. It was a diseased root system. Uh,
The
it didn't
roots
go
didn't go
deep.
deep
It
enough.
didn't go deep
They
enough.
right.
No, and it caused, or many times the roots were deep, but the soil was bad, and so the minerals did not seep up into the tree to give it
Right.
strength and to give it stability. And so we would talk about many times when we were in the early years when we were really fleshing all this out. You especially got a lot of couples who would come to you for counseling. Their marriage was in trouble. They would be in trouble individually with addictions or with issues in their lives or whatever. And when you would start questioning about their root system, they'd had no prayer, they had no word. And it's like, that's the issue. That's the
Right.
issue right there.
Exactly.
It's not even going to take a strong wind to blow you
No.
over.
No.
Your root system, is everything.
I would tell young couples, I would try to talk them down out of the tree, literally. I say, look, you're like two squirrels running around up in the branches, chasing each other and chirping at each other. You're not going to fix this in the branches.
Yeah.
Get to the trunk. Come on down. Let's get back to the root because we've got an issue in the roots.
Yeah.
I got to where I would tell people when they'd come in for counseling, I would just start there. And I would say, before we even get going here, explain to me your God connection.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times the billboard issue was shown right there.
Mm-hmm.
Because if it's not right in the roots,
No.
you can paint that tree. You can.
Yeah.
But it's
Yeah.
it's
No.
just not
And
going to be.
it is God connection.
Right. It's
That
God
is all it
connection.
is. So, I mean, anybody
God
that wants to know
connection.
about the roots, go back and listen to our podcast on
Yeah.
God connection and get all the resources that you can. As a matter of fact, and I will just say this right here, if you go to our website, kqministries.net, and you go down to personal roadmap, we start with God connection. We have a lot of resources there. We are continually adding resources to that roadmap for you. It's a free course, free online course, free online resources, nothing to purchase. And you can take advantage of that there. One thing that we say about the root system, we say the root system determines the growth of the entire tree, the trunk, the branches, and the leaves and fruit. A weak root system produces a weak tree. So as we move up our tree and as we move up into all of the aspects of our life, it's ludicrous to try to fix a trunk problem in the trunk or a branch problem in the branches. We always have to go back to the roots.
It's a root issue.
Always have to go back to the roots. This after we move out of the roots into the trunk, we have defined the trunk as our home, those who are closest to us, our family. So talk about how we approach that.
Our dwelling, because there could be people living in a dwelling and they're not actually family. Most of the time,
Mhm.
it would be families. I am totally convinced that until there's significant change in the home, if we're going to speak about the church, to people listening that are involved in a church, I say until there's significant change in the home, the church is stuck. To those people or to others in different walks of life, I say, if you dread going home, you're not going to be worth much when you leave. The home is just so incredibly important. And then when we turn it to the talk of what we really are, we are at home.
Mm-hmm.
We are at home. Many people that I have talked to have, an issue maybe with the evils of Halloween, and I'm not going to go there. I think there's a lot of evil that goes with that, but the key thing with that is masks. And I say there are people that are against it, but practice it 365 days a year. What mask do I need? Okay, I'm going out. I'm going to work. I got to put on my work mask. I'm going to college. Got to put on my college mask. I'm going to church. Got to put on my Sunday, whatever, mask. Home is the issue. If I am a jerk at home, I'm a jerk. It doesn't matter what other people think of me. You and Braden and Kendra and Derek, you know what I am. Why? Because we are together at home. So when you really boil it down to, okay, one major kingdom value is serving. Well, is that just at your job? Is that just at a church? Is that with an organization? No. How are you serving at home? Do you serve at home? Home, for good or bad. Home is the greatest influence. And when the home is wrong, then it can take years and years to get that, to get those things changed that was ingrained in us at home. When we talk about the trunk of the tree, the home is just incredibly important. The home is where we understand divine order. Now, you say anything about divine order, you've even taught, I don't know if you're going to say anything about it, but you've tackled some tough words like submission and these things in this teaching. There's a lot to learn. But divine order, biblical divine order, abuses no one.
Right.
Biblical divine order. Now, people that just grab a verse for their own good, no, that's not going to work. But biblical divine order, that's lived out in the home, and it absolutely abuses no one, and everybody thrives. Literally, we should thrive at home and not just survive. But the home is the issue.
So that brings us then back to the root system. Because if our root system is fed by social media and self-help books and humanistic principles, then that is what the home is going to be built on. And we are going to approach that from a humanistic, competitive, comparative viewpoint. But if our root system is fed by prayer and the word, God connection, then what is going to emerge are principles from the word, which are servanthood and not being a jerk and fruit of the spirit and all of these things. So that's why we say the root system has to be God connection. And you're going to see it in the trunk.
Absolutely.
You cannot make the trunk separate and apart from what is feeding.
No.
You cannot have a strong, holy, godly home built on a humanistic root system. It cannot happen.
No, it cannot happen. And when we're talking about kingdom values like serving, if everybody in the home, if everyone is not taking their place in an age-appropriate serving manner, then most of the time, not all of the time, but most of the time, the home can be explained by one statement, one worn out woman. Serving, when we serve at home, it frees us up to become. It allows us to attack these repeatable things that have to happen in a home. And if there's not a system, then it will become a vortex that will suck all of the bigger things that could be done down into it because of confusion. We understand this. We've had seasons of it where that vortex was getting the best of us.
Mm-hmm.
It's the home where we learn. It's the home where it's fleshed out. The home is
Yeah.
incredibly important.
So once we move out of the trunk, which comes from the roots, we go into the branches. And here is where so many, especially Christians, get confused, I think. Branches do not grow from the root system. Branches grow from the trunk. And so what happens is many Christians and many Christian leaders, it feels to me, tries to take their branches and grow them like parallel or something to the trunk, and it doesn't work that way. Our main principle for this section says the branches of the tree spring from the trunk of the tree, which springs from the roots. The branches are the main areas that are the outflow of our life. Our ministries, our careers and jobs, our private study, our relationships, our hobbies, our investment in people, and most of all, encapsulating all of that, our time. What is done with the time allotted to us reflects directly on what feeds our root system. And I have always said you can tell what the focus of a family is or a home is by how they collectively spend their free time. We all have to work. We all have jobs. We all have to make a living. But what you do with your free time tells me everything about your root system. And usually there are 3 areas that people focus on, usually. And I know this is a broad brush, and I'm not trying to paint everybody with it. I'm
Right.
just saying that usually it's like this. There are 3 areas. One is education, status, power. And so you will find a family that is focused on that kind of a thing. They spend all of their free time pouring into their brains, going to seminars, learning, doing this kind of thing.
Right.
The second way they do it is through entertainment. This can be vacations, camping, which we all need. I'm not against that. Sports, constantly sports, entertainment, relaxation, fun. If all the free time is spent in this area, this is not a family whose root system, in my opinion, probably is controlled by God connection. Because when you find a family who has to make their living, but in their free time, they do the third option, which is kingdom, and they work for the kingdom, whatever that looks like, helping their fellow man, being the church, being missional in their approach to their community. All of these sorts of things. When you find a home doing this, you will find a home usually that's rooted in prayer and the word and in God connection. So branches do not grow separate and apart
Right.
from the home. Branches grow directly from the home. And where you have a massive issue is when somebody tries to grow a branch that is totally different from what they're practicing at home and what's feeding the root system.
It's very true. You talk about branches, and you read off all the categories and what it includes. Life. I pretty much just say life management.
Right.
It's our life. There are so many options now. There's no way to keep up. There's no way. It's just like we have now created through the internet. Man has created what man cannot handle. And so it's a tsunami of options. And so there are three key words that helps us navigate that without just getting pushed away. And that is purpose and priorities and people.
Mm-hmm.
Purpose, priorities, and people. Purpose, I'm glad you're writing. You've taught a lot about this, and you teach a lot in our teaching about purpose, and you're writing a book on that now. And I'm looking forward to seeing that because it's so incredibly important for people to realize what is their purpose. We talk. My terminology is God wiring and not rewiring. And so it's finding your purpose, not somebody else's, not finding somebody that you admire and, oh, I want to be like them. I want to be like them. Well, it's good to look at principles that may be of people we respect and honor, but to be like them, to want to be like them, no. If God would have wanted someone else, they'd be twins or triplets or whatever. It's us. It's our purpose. What is our individual purpose? And of course, that is under the purpose of Jesus Christ, who came to seek and to save that which was lost, who came, he was so very clear. He came to give abundant life. He came to destroy the works of the devil. For this purpose was he manifest. Okay, so we have that, but then we align our purpose, how he wired us. So that's that. If people would just get that, then it would help quiet a lot of the noise.
Right. Because if you try if you try to live your life according to somebody else's purpose, that's like trying to take a branch from another tree and put it on your trunk. I mean, it just
It
doesn't
doesn't
work.
work.
It just doesn't
No,
work.
it doesn't work. There's no, and there is to be, and I know this is a little bit of a rabbit trail, but I'm not going far, okay? We just can't put another human in the king zone. And so many people are not complete in him, like Colossians speaks of, and they're trying to be complete in someone else.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just we have all either fought that at one point in our life, and some literally lose. It's like that book I read back in the 1600s when I was a youth pastor by John Mason. You were born an original, don't die a copy. Okay, this purpose word, we could talk a lot about that, but you're writing a book on it. So let's go to the next one. Priorities. What is priority for me? There are many things that we could do. There are many choices. We're loaded with, again, I say options. But what is priority? What are the things that matters? And this is a lifelong fight. I tend toward being on the internet too much. It can be a massive distraction. All of y'all laugh at me at 9:30 when my alarm goes off every night. You will say, "Get off the internet. Time to get off the internet." Well, I have that on there, so I will get off of the internet. And it's like priorities. What is priority? And I'm doing a lot of good things. There's always distraction. There's always temptation. It's there. It's everywhere. It's this tsunami that we deal with. And so priorities are very important.
And so let's take that to
Okay.
this tree thing, and let's not forget that this is not a man-made analogy that we have come up with. This came from Jeremiah. We are
Right.
to be as a tree. Okay, all of our branches are not to grow on one side of the trunk.
Right.
They're to grow in an
Right.
even way around, because if they're only on one side, the tree's going to topple. Another thing is branches have to be pruned in order for the tree to grow. And nature does this usually. The branches that are not productive, nature will remove from the tree. However that happens, they will become dead. They'll fall off, whatever. A tree has to be pruned. When you see a well pruned tree that becomes totally full, it is gorgeous. It is productive. Whether you have done it, whether man has done it, or whether nature has done it. So it is necessary for us, in my opinion, to regularly, and I do this, and this is another book I'm writing, a study. It's a 7-day study on the week between, where I do this usually in the week between Christmas and New Year's, but the week between can speak of any time in the
Right.
whole year where you're saying I need to go from one season to the next.
Need to reset.
Okay, I reset. Yes. So what that is that's taking stock. Okay, which of my branches need to be pruned? So in dealing with priorities in relationship to
Right.
branches, we
Right.
must always keep in mind that a branch may be great for now, but it may be need to be pruned to make way for later.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I gained a revelation from Scripture not long ago that our life is always in removal or pruning.
So good.
Dead things to be taken away, but then down here we're never complete down here. Priorities, your priorities before you're married are not the same, or better not be the same as when you get married. And then your priorities with no children, they've got to shift, and then they shift as, so it's not a, we got it right. Okay. Now it's all right. And okay, this is the way it's going to be on out. No, it's not. We live in that priority fight. It's a fight. To stay prioritized is a fight. And so in the branches, we know purpose and priorities, and then people. This is a big one. People. I'm going to say this. I'm going to say this in a manner I've been criticized for this, so I've tried to bring it around maybe and say it, maybe a little more palatable for someone. But the enemy can only fight us where we are. The enemy at every stage will change the approach. Don't have time to name all the stages, but let me just say that, an umbrella statement. One way is people. I'm not talking about unsaved people that we want to see enter the kingdom. I'm not saying that. I'm talking many times it's people who have entered the kingdom, but they think that spiritual birth is spiritual retirement, and they're not connected. They're not God connected, but they want you to be God.
I think I have a name for them that just came to me. Maybe it's revelation. Maybe it's not.
Well, let's give it a whirl. What is it?
Kingdom squatters. They're just squatting on the kingdom land. They entered, but they're not being productive. Okay, there's that.
Hey,
okay.
I will. Let's just
We'll
just take that right there, and I won't share what came to my mind when you said it.
All right.
People, when we're speaking about people now, again, the enemy can only fight us where we are, right? So, if we're being productive in the kingdom, if we're focused on the kingdom, if we're God connected, the enemy's going to try to connect a parasite to us. Now, I am not saying look at people and say, you're a bucket with holes, get out of my life. I'm not saying that.
No.
I'm saying that we give those people a particular thing to do, and until they do it, we don't keep saying the same thing over and over and over. When we went out in Arizona many years ago to that one conference, and it was a staff member speaking, and he said something that absolutely, I have repeated it and repeated. He said, in leadership, think checkers. You make a clear move, and until somebody else moves, don't move again. Well, when we're talking about people, that's what we have to do. In love, I'm not saying shut people out, But in our life management, in managing life, in the branches, the enemy is going to try to distract us any way he can. Internet, options, stuff, pursuits, people, to get us to settle for the lesser in our own life. And the branches is where it plays out.
And not only settle for the lesser, but in some cases can be destructive. The good is always the enemy of best. And our families many times suffer because of our own insecurities of needing affirmation from people. So we will do and do and do for people to the detriment of our own families, because our families are not saying, thank you, you're so great, I love you. But the people might be. But the people aren't changing. So we have to be very, very discerning about what we are to do for others and how much, because the enemy would love to come in, and because we all know, as a follower of Jesus Christ, we are to love people. He loves
Absolutely.
people. We are
Absolutely.
to love people, but the enemy loves to distort the good. And so one thing that I have likened this to in our teaching, we came from the South, is Spanish moss. Spanish moss, if you've seen pictures of bayous and the cypress trees with the moss growing down from them, that's Spanish moss, those gray things. Okay. A lot of people say Spanish moss kills the tree. Spanish moss does not kill the tree. But what it does, if it's allowed to go unchecked, if it's not trimmed, it sucks the nutrients from the tree and the branches break. That's one thing. Another thing, it grows prolifically. You have to keep it trimmed. Okay, so it grows prolifically. It will totally block out the light. And when that happens, the light does not get to the tree and the branches will break and will fall off. So it doesn't kill the tree, but it can cause the tree to die, if this makes sense, because it sucks the nutrients and there's nothing left for the actual tree. So people can do the same thing. They can suck the very life out of us if it's not God directed and God ordained that we be in their lives. If we don't seek Him, if it's not coming from the root system, God connection, prayer and the word, where we know His voice and we know who we're supposed to be investing in and who we aren't. If we don't listen to that, they can become a Spanish moss on our lives, and our families can be destroyed. We can be destroyed. Our effectiveness, our branches, they can fall off. They can be destroyed. I mean, it's a really serious situation.
It's very serious. And I think one of the things that really brought light to me on this was attraction or guide.
Mm-hmm.
Attraction or guide. We've been privileged to go overseas, and periodically we will be able to go to this great landmark, and that can be a great experience depending on the guide.
Right.
If the guide thinks they're the attraction, then it's really not as enjoyable. But when you've got a guide that wants you to know everything about the attraction, and it's not about them. We are the guide.
Right.
He is the attraction.
Right.
And it's like, I am not your answer. Again, Colossians, complete in Him. When we tell people, I cannot complete you, I am not your answer. And when people start saying, oh, you just always give me the answers, and there's just nobody like you, we have to step up right there and say, whoa, hang on. No, you're not going to make me a God. You can appreciate what I've done, and that's fine, but you're not going to worship me.
Right.
And we be very, very careful to not end up getting eaten slowly by worms like Herod did rapidly.
Yeah. Because
he gave not the glory to God. And when the people started, this is like a God. You're speaking like a God. We have to be very careful of that when it comes to people.
So good. So good. Okay, moving up the tree.
All right, let's go.
So we've got God connection controlling everything in the root system. We have our home, which is springing up from that. And that's where our branches spring from, is our home, which is fed by the root system.
Right.
And then we come to leaves and fruit. And our statement that we make at the beginning of this session is the leaves and fruit of a tree represent the seasons of life and ministry. And I would add leadership. This is where we exhibit to the world who we are. Although the roots are hidden, the leaves and the fruit ultimately reveal the stability of the root system. The leaves represent the type tree we are, and the fruit is the offering we give back to those around us. Both the leaves and the fruit directly show others the quality of and what feeds our root system.
We've had a lot of fun teaching this segment. We've made some people very uncomfortable. We probably would have been uncomfortable also if someone else would have been teaching us, but that's the advantage of when you've taught, you kind of take the medicine and get used to the bitter taste. I don't remember where we found the person that talked about the 7 seasons of life, and it all dealt with ills.
Mm-hmm.
And it was spills, drills, thrills, bills, ills, pills, and wills.
I love it. I still do. It's true.
When you think about the ills of all of that, it's so very true. Age appropriate seasons of life. Now that we've passed through a few, I'm understanding more what you've taught about transition, that we literally transition from conception to death.
Mm-hmm.
There's never a time, and we all get into that. Okay, if when I get married.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, no, when I get married.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, when we have children.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, we can go back to grade school and junior high and all that. Okay. And then it's when this and when that. And then you get into years. Well, then it starts holidays in a year. When. And in reality, it's just seasons. And they come and they go. And understanding that and becoming okay with that, and focusing on what we can do with now, and then based on watching somebody 5-10 years ahead of you and trying to make the right adjustments, knowing it's going to happen. It's going to happen. We process through these seasons. We're not going to stop it.
I'm going to do a little spoiler alert here, because one part of my book I'm writing on purpose is there's an application in there where I challenge the reader to actually write down what their next season will be. And so I challenge the reader in there to write down the ideal thing they would like to see or place they would like to be during that next season. I saw something that John Maxwell actually said a few weeks ago on social media. He said, don't leave something, go to something.
Oh, very good.
We always feel like that in these seasons, oh my goodness, it's over. Oh my word. We lament, we mourn. But if we could realize that the season is going to change, we celebrate what it was, but we also anticipate what the next one is. So not leaving something, go to something, but we have to plan that. We have to be intentional about that. So when we get up to these leaves and this fruit, we aren't going to have good fruit if we try to bear fruit out of season. We have to anticipate what that's going to be and what that's going to look like for us.
And the frustrating thing that I'm hearing and seeing, and I think is just a major trick of the enemy of all of us, is this business about you know, 65 and it's over. You're retiring now.
Does the tree die? Is that what happens at 65? The tree dies?
Some people think it does, and then other people think that somewhere in the Bible, the age 65 came down from heaven. It's absolutely amazing. I don't have time to take off on all that.
Well,
but
may I just interject here that it's quite possible that if that's the thinking, the root system is not God connection, and it could be another
oh, it absolutely
influx.
is. Well, it is. It absolutely is. That's not coming from God.
No.
Now, retirement is not a kingdom word.
Right.
Period. Reposition is.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not saying that somebody hangs on and drives some thriving business in the ground or some thriving ministry or a church. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying that retirement is not a kingdom word. And if you want to get biblical, we're all the time talking about what does the word say, what does the word say. You don't want to study in the Bible the age 65. Because the first mention of age 65 in the Bible and the second mention of age 65 in the Bible is about men producing offspring. Doesn't sound like retirement to me. So what we have to do is we have to look kingdom. We must reposition. I would tell elders that I was close to years ago, and you don't just tell elders this unless you got a relationship with them. But I would tell them things like, would you please not die until you do? Would you please not kick back until you kick the bucket? Would you please never say this statement that came out of the pit of hell? I've paid my dues. Would you realize that you've got kingdom ability until you die? My mother is 85 years old. I was talking with her. We've talked in the last several months. And I said, Mother, it's very hard for you to understand that you are just as powerful right now in the kingdom as you were when me and my three brothers were young and you were spending hours preparing your Sunday school class and you and Dad were the youth leaders and you were working in the Christian school. I said, either you're as powerful now in the kingdom or the scripture, it's not by might or power, but by my spirit, needs to be taken out of the Bible. Now, we've got to have an understanding about seasons. We were ministering in Canada, and I didn't get permission to mention his name, so I won't. But you remember, we were eating lunch, and there was a man and woman that had given their life overseas, and they were in a retirement thinking mode. And
they had just come back, I believe, and transitioned back from overseas.
And they were like, I mean, they were in the dumps. And so I sat there, and I usually don't go in this hard on somebody unless I've got a great relationship, but it just hit me so hard. And I looked at him, you remember, I looked at him, I said, whoa, you got this wrong. And I went into this. Well, I just was in a meeting in Louisiana last month, and he happened to be there too. Well, he's written a book. He had told me, I think he had just completed his 67th miracle service. The concept of this retirement not being a kingdom word, but being a reposition word, it really spoke to him. And he's done something with it. And I mean, it's an amazing story. We have, if we're breathing, we have the possibility of being involved in the kingdom and making a difference. Either that or prayer, faith, speaking encouragement, speaking blessing over. Okay, now if we're going to move all that aside and take all that out of the Bible, okay, you're 65 and you're done. But if we're going to take the entire Bible
right,
for what it says, then you could be a shut-in or in a nursing home and with the only ability to pray, and literally powerful things can be happening through your life.
Well, that is borne out in Scripture. Acts 13:36 says, David, by the will of God, in other words, God's purpose, that boule is the Greek word there, God's purpose for his life. He served God according to God's purpose for his life. And that verse says, until he fell, he served his own generation.
That's right.
Until
By
he
the will
fell
of
on
God.
sleep. By the will of God, until he fell on sleep, until he died. Fell on sleep, he died. So if that's our pattern, which I believe it is, then if we aren't dead, we still have purpose, and it has to come from the root system. Society would tell us we're no good after a certain age, after a certain season, but that's the problem. Society is the faulty root system.
Right.
The Word of God, the God connection, the Word in prayer says we have purpose until we fall on sleep, until we die.
And here's the malignant cancer to that. Position.
Absolutely.
Position. Because people allow their identity to be in their position. So we say that then when the season changes, and the leaf falls, well, when you have decided that position, that's you. Well, when that changes, then what am I going to do?
You have no identity.
What do I do? You've said many times, and you know, I'm so glad to hear you say this, because if time moves on, chances are, usually men go first, usually. And you're speaking about, and the way we talk about your purpose your purpose doesn't change whether I'm alive or dead.
No, it can't be connected to another person.
My purpose, now we sure help each other push our purposes ahead.
Right.
But it has to be an understanding, and this season thing, oh, how we need revelation on it. Can you imagine what could happen in every church if the elders of the church, put your age on it, I don't care, whatever the ages are, but if the elders of the church, and I'm going to do a lot on this because this is a passion with me, if they realized what could be accomplished, the prayer covering they could put over a church, the faith they could speak. My mother's 85 years old and has her own apartment complex that she drives around every week and prays over, and stops and ministers to people if it looks safe with complete strangers. There's a world of difference in that thinking and the thinking of it. Well, it's over, it's done. Now it's all the younger with seasons. We've got to get the season thing right.
And we have to do another podcast. We have to talk about this multi-generational thing because it's extremely important, and we have to talk about it. So don't let positions or seasons define you. That's our closing line every time we teach the tree, because someone else will one day do what we are all doing. So our identity and our self-worth and our reward comes from the root system. So I think we can end this the way we started it, with Jeremiah 17:7-8. And this is the message I think that we both would give to any listener who's listening. Blessed is the man and woman that trusteth in the Lord, and whose hope the Lord is. For he or she shall be as a tree planted by the waters, and that spreadeth out her roots by the river, and shall not see when heat cometh, but her leaf shall be green, and shall not be careful in the year of drought, neither shall cease from yielding fruit. So I think our prayer for everybody would be that they grow into a strong, healthy, productive tree.